Do y'all remember what happened in chapter 9? If not, you can flip back one chapter in your Bible. Do y'all remember what happened in chapter 9 of Leviticus? The priests began their ministry. And chapter 10, the priest fell. You know, if history didn't repeat itself, that would be very shocking, wouldn't it? But that's how the ministry began with Adam and Eve. That's how the worship began with Cain and Abel. That's how it's going to begin with, as soon as Moses comes down with the Ten Commandments. Now this is how it's going to begin with the tabernacle and the priesthood. And that's how it's going to begin with the Lord's church with Ananias and Sapphira. And not to mention the ministry of Jesus with Judas. Unfortunately, as soon as, and it seems to be, I was reading up on this week, and it seems to be almost not quite cyclical like the time period of the Judges, but similar to that, where mankind is one of two things typically. We are either in rebellion against God and things are going bad for us, or we're living with God and things are going great, and when things are going great, we go into rebellion against God and things start going bad to us. So it's similar to the time period of the Judges, but this is in all time periods. In all time periods, God blesses a nation, they obey Him, and it doesn't take too long till the individuals forget and disobey Him. And then He punishes them. All right, after He consecrated and the priests finally get to work at the end of chapter 9, what does He do to show that He has accepted the priests and the tabernacle at the very end of chapter 9? Yes, His glory appeared to them, and He has fire consume their offering on the altar. Well, His glory and fire is about to appear again, but it's going to be the opposite. Nadab and Abihu, His glory and fire will come down in punishment. History repeats itself. How many sons did Aaron have? 4 sons. And this narrative is going to focus on the first 2, and by the next paragraph we have to focus on the other 2. The end of chapter 9, all the priests and high priest and tabernacle were accepted by God. Now, the priests are not going to be accepted by God. 1 Corinthians 10:12 says, "Let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall." We have to be careful when we start thinking that we are doing so good obeying God. Be careful, because if you start getting too high on your horse thinking you are the best obedient to God, it's not very long till you fall. We always should stay humble. God administered His punishment when they disobeyed. There's 3 sections to this part: the sin, the punishment, and Moses' instructions. Let's read first of all the sin. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons, which sons? The oldest sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it and laid incense on it and offered unauthorized, KJV used to say profane, another translation is strange, fire before the Lord, which He had not commanded them. We're going to spend some time discussing what could be the sin here, but there's some specific terminology used here. First of all, how is the fire described? Strange, unauthorized, profane. Okay? And then it repeats a second phrase there at the end of that verse, which He had not commanded. So there's a lot already. Verse 2, and fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. The chapter begins on a jarring note, and I'm going to tell you, we don't know for a fact how long it's been, but I'm going to give you a pretty good guess of how long it's been since chapter 9. It's probably either the exact same day or the next day. And I'll tell you why that is later in the chapter. But it has not been very long. It's not like they've had years to forget God's law. They disobey almost immediately. Now, let's talk about what's happened in the last 1 year. Oh, Carly, go ahead.
Do you think that they thought they were disobeying or just thought they were easier?
Well, Harley asked, do you think they're disobeying, or do you think they thought they were doing a better or easier way? The quick answer to that is it depends on what you think their sin was. Because there's about 4 different ideas of what their sin was. For years, my study, I think their sin was intoxication. And so I don't think they were thinking at all. I think they were just making a mistake while drunk. Now, some people think that it was they got the fire from the wrong location, which might be an easier way. Just saying.
I tended to think along the line that so many of us are so guilty of sin.
It won't hurt anything to do this. Change it a little bit. Yep. The third theory is, because we make a big emphasis on the word fire there, but I want you to read the whole passage again. Each took his censer, put his fire in it, laid incense on it. So when we're actually saying the fire is being rejected by God, we're talking about all 3 things: censer, incense, fire. So there's a possibility they used the wrong incense. So they could have used the wrong fire, they could have used the wrong incense, they could have done another thing that I want us to notice. I'm jumping around real quick trying to get quickly to your answer. We've been discussing that there's sin offerings, there's guilt offerings, those type of things. And there's going to be a mistake that's going to happen later in the chapter that will not result in death. All of those things were only covering sins that were what kind of sins? The guilt offering, the sin offering, the burnt offering, what did those cover? What kind of sins? Unintentional. So I think the one thing we can know for sure is there was something about this sin that made it intentional sin, compared to the mistake or sin, depending on how you look at it, that Aaron and the other 2 sons are going to make in the next paragraph. And they don't die. So intentional versus unintentional. There had to be some, I'm going to do this, compared to just doing it without thinking. What he had not commanded. So either the incense or the fire was taken. And here's a 4th. I knew there was 4. I hadn't thought of the 4th one until just now. Incense, fire, drunkenness. The 4th one is, or God just hadn't commanded that. God commanded them to take fire and put it on the altar, but at certain times and certain people, but maybe he had not commanded this and they just thought, here's an act of worship we're going to do for God. We're going to take fire and put it on the altar, when he didn't tell them to. Because there are passages that say only the high priest should ever offer the fire. So maybe they were doing something that wasn't their job to do. Lori?
Mine says each took his censer, put fire in it, and laid incense on it, and they offered unholy fire before the Lord.
Unholy. And that's the main point of, I guess, the whole book of Leviticus, and that's why we're studying it this year, but that's the main point of these chapters, is holiness versus unholiness, cleanliness versus uncleanness. And so their fire was not holy, because there was only certain fire that was set apart for God, and this fire was not set apart for God. So either they took the wrong fire, the wrong person took the fire, or they added the wrong incense. There was something about it that was unholy. That's a great version. Maybe all three. That's right. So where were they supposed to get the fire? And by taking the fire, how can you take fire? What does that even mean? Anybody got a guess? What it's talking about is coals. They would take the coals of one fire and move it to the other location. And I want to get back in my book so I don't make a mistake, but I'm pretty sure about what I'm about to say. It was supposed to be from the altar where the burnt offering was. So I thought that, but I was just wanting to find it to make sure I was speaking correctly. So when they were taking fire, and I don't even know if they were ever supposed to, but when the high priest was supposed to take fire and start the fire, it was supposed to come from the coals of the burnt offering sacrifices. And so they could have took the fire from a different location. That would be unholy. Yes?
I'm looking at comparative verses here. This is from the easy to read verse.
Yes.
It says that if you did not use the fire that was on the altar, they took fire from somebody's place.
Yep. Yeah, the easy to read version just gives the explanation in their passage and says they took the fire from the wrong place, not from the altar.
And it says, and he commanded them.
Yep.
So he did command them. He did what he did not command.
Yes, so let's see that again. Which he had not commanded them. Now, contrary to his command, against his command. Those are really two different definitions, to be honest with you. Because the way the ESV reads, this is a passage that we often go to talk about how we shouldn't add things to God's commands. Because if God commands something, we shouldn't do something he had not commanded. But your translation is actually the opposite. They were breaking a command of God, is the way yours is reading. Yeah. So they would have known what they were supposed to do, and they did something different. I'll read you a couple other translations. NRSV says, we're not there yet. That's verse 3. Let me keep reading now. Verse 3. Then Moses said to Aaron, here's the why. Here's the why of why they're being punished. For this is what the Lord has said, among those who are near me, I will be sanctified. Before all the people, I will be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. So why are they being punished? Because what they did not glorify God or sanctify God. They were not treating God sanctified. They were not setting him apart. They were not treating him as holy. So they were treating him like an average person. So that's why they're being punished. Now, how does Aaron react to God's answer that Moses gives him? He kept silent. What we're about to read in the next verses is even tougher, but could you imagine as a father watching your child die because they deserved it? That doesn't get rid of the human emotions, even if you know they deserved it. You're still seeing your child die, Arthur.
We may not have recorded for us, but he may have told him exactly
Yeah.
how to preserve the fire, how to put it out.
Yep.
But if you go down to verse 7 here, saying, you get to it, I know, and you will not even go out from the doorway of the tent of your meeting, or you will die.
Yep. Yep.
Precise.
Yeah, very precise. And for the last 8 days, they weren't supposed to have left the tent of meeting, or they would die. And so he warned them about death for disobedience in chapter, I think that was 7, at the end of 7, if I remember right. No, it was 8. In chapter 8, they had to stay there for the 7 days, or they would die. And
The part about not glorifying him, though, may have been because they disobeyed his command.
yes. So, whichever way your version reads, it can actually teach a little bit different, whether that is adding to God's commands or disobeying God's commands. But either way, when we worship any way except for how he commands, we are not glorifying him, we are not sanctifying him, and that is disgraceful and punishable in God's eyes. Now, he will not, I better not say will not, I'm not going to say what God's going to do, but we don't see him pull a Ananias and Sapphira on us today, but there will be punishment. It is when we do not glorify and sanctify God in how we worship him, by breaking or going beyond his commands. Let's read now Moses' instructions. Moses didn't have to tell Aaron to hold his peace, but now he's going to tell them what to do. Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron. So Aaron's uncle would make them what to Aaron? Cousins. So he calls Aaron's cousins and says, "Come near, carry your brothers away from the front of the sanctuary and out of the camp." Now, we're not really to verse 7 yet, but Arthur already read it, so I'm going to reference it again. They could not leave the sanctuary. This whole time period, they weren't supposed to leave, or else they would die. So Aaron and his sons cannot take their brother or their son out and bury them, because they are currently in the work of priest. And to leave during that work, you would die. And so they cannot do the burying. It has to be cousins. Number 2, and we're not to this yet, but in our next chapter, we're going to start talking about clean and unclean. Touching a dead body makes you unclean. So they could not perform the duties of a priest if they had touched a dead body. That would ruin the worship they were leading in. So the cousins do it. And so they came near and carried them in their coats out of the camp, as Moses had said. Now, this is kind of interesting. We heard that God came down with fire and killed them, but what's still on these 2 men after they've been killed? Their tunics are still on them. So, how does, and this is one of those unanswerable questions, how does God kill someone with fire and there's still a body left and there's still a tunic left? Arthur? Yeah, that's the best guess we have. Yep. That's the best guess we have, is God's fire was something like lightning, where it killed them, but there was still a body, and it wasn't fully burned up. At the end of chapter 9, when he did it to the sacrifice on the altar, it was fully burned up. So the fire has to be different than the fire of chapter 9. All right, so the cousins take them out, and they obey Moses. And Moses said to Aaron and to Eleazar and to Ithamar. Who's Eleazar and Ithamar? The brothers, the surviving sons. And Aaron is the father. "Do not let your hair of your heads hang loose. Do not tear your clothes, lest you die." You're not allowed. And there's a lot of reasons we could think why, but we're not in the why guessing game right now. You're not allowed to mourn your brother and your son. If you do, you'll die. Now, the why part of it would be they're already in the job of high priest and priest. They're literally in the tabernacle offering worship. If they do this, they're profaning worship. If they go into fasting and sackcloth and ashes, they would be running other people's worship, and you would die. What else might be the reason, Jake?
Well, I don't know, but I was just thinking, that tells you that worship is not for us.
Yeah.
It's for God.
That's right.
We worship God.
That's right.
And He expects that from us.
Yes. Yeah. Worship is being treated extremely holy here, so holy that when you see your brother die, you can't stop worshiping because you got to finish the task you came for. Number two, this could also be he doesn't want them to set the example by mourning, because if they do, then it's going to show Israel they disagree with what God just did. And by not mourning, they're approving of God's capital punishment of their child and brother. Even if on the inside they're ripped to shreds, on the outside they have to be showing God made the right decision. Lest you die and wrath come upon all the congregation. If it's not just going to be upon them. But let your brothers, the whole house of Israel, bewail the burning that the Lord has kindled. So, people can mourn, but it can't be you. Now, there's a discussion here, and I don't have the answer to it. What are they bewailing? Are they upset that disobedience to God happened, or are they upset for the death? Are they mourning the death or mourning the disobedience? I don't know. But Moses says that the congregation can mourn, but you can't. Not right now. Not during worship that you're leading, Arthur.
For us, it's very way.
Yep.
There's nothing more important than our minds being in the right place.
Yes.
And worshiping God in the right way.
Yes. And sometimes that means that we have to leave everything else off of our mind. Which is hard, but it's hard, but it's the right way. And do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die, for the anointing oil of the Lord is upon you. And they did according to the word of Moses. All right, that's the verse I was hinting at earlier. That's why we believe this is the same day or the day after of chapter 9. Because chapter 9, they were just anointed to be priest and high priest. And he's saying the anointing oil is still upon you. So it sounds like they physically still have the oil dripping down their beard while they're disobeying and being burned or killed by fire.
So why do you think they were wrong?
That we're about to get there. Very next verse. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, drink no wine or strong drink, you or your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute to you throughout your generations. You are distinguished between the holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean. You are to teach the people of Israel all the statutes of the Lord has spoken to them by Moses. So the very next thing after telling them how to handle themselves because of their brothers being killed is, he says, don't get drunk as priests. That way you don't accidentally not distinguish. What's the opposite of not distinguish? Mistake common versus holy things. So it seems like their sin had been mistaking holy and common fire or incense. Why did they mistake it? I believe because they were drunk. They made the mistake of getting the wrong fire or getting the wrong incense. But I can't tell you that for a fact. But it's interesting that he immediately brings that up and says, you will die if you do this, Arthur.
But in fact, like you say, he gives this commandment right here.
Yep.
To them. That indicates that it had happened.
Yes. Yeah.
There had been an instance of it happening.
Yeah.
We had an instance right before.
Yep.
Where it could have happened.
Yep. Now, between the common and the unclean, we're about to spend the next few chapters, and in all honesty, almost the whole rest of the book, distinguishing common and unclean. There's a lot of common versus unclean, but in the context, they're going to teach those rules to everyone. But in the context, we're probably thinking about worship, which is what we've been talking about this whole time. Common fire versus unclean fire. Common incense versus unclean incense. Common clothing versus unclean clothing. Seems to be the gist here.
On down, this is holy, and this whole thing.
Yep. Yep. Now, another thing that we notice in verse 11, what is their job as priests? We think of their primary job to be offering sacrifices, but what else is their job here? They're teachers. They're supposed to teach so that other people distinguish between common and holy. There was a lot of slides we didn't look at. You didn't need them, right? Okay. Now, you've just seen your brothers or son die. You've just been told you have to continue leading in worship that day. Now you've just been told, don't get drunk. Make sure you know the difference between common and unclean and tell the differences to Israel. Now he's going to tell them the reward for obeying. Moses spoke to Aaron and Eleazar and Ithamar, his surviving sons, take the grain offering that is left of the Lord's food offerings and eat its unleavened bread. Excuse me, there's not the word bread there. It unleavened beside the altar, for it is most holy. So what are they supposed to eat? The bread offering. Where are they supposed to eat it? Beside the altar. And don't add any leaven to it. You shall eat it in a holy place because it is your due and your son's due. So who's going to eat it? Only those priests. From the Lord's offering, for so I am commanded. But the breast that is waved and the thigh that is contributed, you shall eat in a clean place, you and your sons and your daughters with you. So we're not eating this in the tabernacle. This is going back home with you, still to be eaten in a holy way, in a clean place, but with your whole family. They are given you your due, your son's due, from the sacrifice of the peace offerings of the people of Israel. The thigh that is contributed and the breast that is waved, they shall bring with the food offering of the fat pieces to wave for a wave offering before the Lord. It shall be yours and your sons with you as your due forever, as the Lord has commanded. This is your pay. Your pay is you're going to get bread and you're going to be able to take meat home to your family every time you come do this work. Now, we live in a spoiled fat society, but most of societies throughout time, if you could have bread, you're doing really good. But meat, you've had a great day if you come home with meat. And priests are being given a very hard job. It's a life or death job, but he's saying there is a reward to it. You're going to get to bring meat home every time you go home. Now, you get to eat bread while you're doing the job, but you get to take home meat every time that you've offered these sacrifices. To get to lead in God's worship is the greatest honor possible. But if you were only looking at the physical, I don't know if you would want the meat if it meant you could lose your life every time you go to work, right? Some of y'all do jobs that are a little more risky than some of us. But, if the only purpose was physical, and you were guaranteed, I get to bring meat home every day, but I could die every day. It might not be worth the trade-off, but it's not about the physical. They're getting to serve the greatest job for the greatest being ever. They're getting to serve God. Arthur.
I know, actually, I was studying something and one time I was talking about someone getting gifted for eating at the rich man's table or at the king's table for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
We don't realize what a blessing that
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Because praying for your daily bread really meant something to him.
You're exactly right.
You work with enough money to buy a little bread.
Yes. Work all day to try to get enough grain to make bread for one day and do it again. Now, you remember how we just ended with a rule about alcohol right after they got burned up? Now we're doing the opposite. Moses just gave them the rule that you get to take home meat and you get to eat it every day. Why is he bringing this up? He's about to show how they disobeyed the rule. Let's read. Now Moses diligently inquired about the goat of the sin offering. I don't know if he knew what he was already asking. Sometimes you ask the question you already know the answer to so that you can get on to somebody for disobeying. He's looking. Where's the goat for the sin offering? Where is it? Can't find it. And behold, it was burned up. And he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, the surviving sons of Aaron, saying, Why have you not eaten the sin offering in the place of the sanctuary, since it is a thing most holy and has been given to you, that you may bear the iniquity of the congregation and make atonement for them before the Lord? Notice that last part of that phrase. It was given to you to bear the iniquity for the congregation, for the atonement before the Lord. In other words, if you don't do your job as priest, now you've messed up their forgiveness of sins. And so even though it's a great reward to get to eat the meat, if they don't eat the meat, now they've messed up the worship for the congregation. And so the congregation will not receive forgiveness of sins because they did not do their job as priests, including the reward of eating the meat. And he asked this to Eleazar and Ithamar, the surviving sons of Aaron. Behold, its blood was not brought into the inner part of the sanctuary. He's saying, I would have understood if you burned it all up, if the blood had went into the inner part of the sanctuary. This was the meat you were supposed to eat. It had not. As I commanded. They knew the rule. They had disobeyed the rule. And the boys don't answer, Dad answers. Aaron said to Moses, behold, today they have offered their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, and yet such things as these have happened to me. If I had eaten the sin offering today, would the Lord have approved? And when Moses heard that, he approved. This is a really interesting answer that Aaron gives. There's two ways to look at the answer. I'm just going to pick one and go with it. And if you want to talk to me later, I can give you another option. But what Aaron is saying, here's one option we're going to go with. What Aaron is saying is, I followed your rules. I didn't mourn my sons, but my heart is not right to eat this meat. I've sacrificed their sin offering. I've sacrificed everything that they need sacrificed. The congregation's good, but I couldn't eat the meat. Or I would have been wrong in front of God because God knows how I'm feeling right now. And if I'd eaten the meat, I would have messed up the sacrifice. In other words, he's in too deep of grief to have the proper heart for worship to eat the meat. So he did his part for the congregation. He sacrificed the animal. But he didn't do his part as priest because his heart wasn't in it. That's one interpretation, and we'll just go with that one. Any thoughts on that? Okay, let's do some takeaways before we run out of time, because we always want to bring it back to Christ and us today. How important is worship? How important is worship? Extremely important. When we don't worship properly, what does that do to God? It means He's not glorified and He's not sanctified, not set apart as holy. And so when we treat worship, which is a holy thing, as unholy, now we've treated Him as unholy. And so we need to have the right obedience to commands. I'm taking your version of the Bible there, or the ESV version. We need to not add to commands. Both are true with our worship. We need to obey the commands, and we need to not add to commands. Because when we treat worship as unholy, we've treated God as unholy. Yes. Yeah. And there's parts of this that have to do with the elders, but I think of a lot of times when we're dealing with the Levites, any person that stands up and leads in worship, whether that's a song leader, the prayer leader, anyone, we have to make sure we are right with God and that we're doing it in a right manner, leading others in a right way, because when I lead wrong, it's affected the whole congregation. And so if Trevor gets up and leads singing in a wrong manner, now the whole congregation has worshiped in a wrong manner. And so that's a great point. And then, if the interpretation I gave of Aaron at the end is correct, our heart matters in worship. And it's hard sometimes to block out all the things going on in life and have the right heart with God. Our heart matters. In the Lord's Supper especially, but in worship period. Harley?
You're saying, a point that I was trying to make Sunday morning, about the 5 acts of worship.
Yes.
They are all acts of worship.
That's right.
We need to be very attuned.
That's right. That's right. All 5 acts of worship are acts of worship. And so all 5 parts of worship, when we are doing them, we have to treat them as worship, treat them holy, where we're not doing it flippantly, where we're not... And it's tough. I heard a bad story one time recently, and I didn't think it was as bad as the guy that told me it, but it affected his worship. He was saying that a guy got up in front of the Lord's Supper and told all the things that have ever distracted him from the Lord's Supper. And he said, by the end of the guy's speech, I was distracted thinking about all those things. But it's hard sometimes to think about, oh, well, I want the black piece of cracker, not the white piece of cracker. Oh, this juice tastes different today. Oh, well, look what he's wearing serving the Lord's Supper. That's a very interesting OSU tie. There's a million things that we can do to distract ourselves during worship. And when we do, we're not treating it as holy. Jake? Yeah.
But we can't let our own personal emotion get into it because that's where it's not about us.
That's true.
You have to have the right heart, but
yes.
At the end of the day, the worship's not about us. It's
Yeah.
about pleasing to God.
Yeah.
So it's that balance between heart and emotion that you have to
Yes.
walk that line.
Having the right heart for worship also includes knowing it's not about me. I didn't come here for me today. I came here for God. Good point, Jake.
One thing I think we forget sometimes, self-included, God is here.
Yes.
We put him too far away from us.
That's right.
He's somewhere else, we're worshiping him somewhere else.
Yep.
He is here
That's
with
right.
us, where
That's
one or two are gathered together
Yeah.
in his name. He
Yep.
is here, and we forget that sometimes. He is here with us.
Yeah. Like the little kid that sits beside you and reads your text messages, and you're like, stop looking over my shoulder. God is here in our worship, and he knows exactly what we're actually thinking the whole time. There's no hiding it from him. He knows where we're actually at during worship.